Talofa lava and welcome back to Breaking Waves. You're back again with your host, Hana. It's been a busy week, but I have an awesome episode that I'm sure you guys will love. I'm here with Daylen Schmidt, who is a pro-Palestinian activist. He's a mental health advocate, and he's also an artist. Talofa lava and welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
That's all right. Thank you. I remember you commented on one of my posts that I had, and I actually really appreciated it because it was, valid feedback. Sometimes you get people who are just disrespectful, but the fact that you shared that with me, I found it quite interesting. So I actually took the time out to respond to that, which was very valid.
Yeah,
so
I like the response a lot as well.
I'm so happy that you're on the show so we can talk more about that. But first, before we get into it, tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Daylen. I'm an artist. I'm a musician, and I guess my art is primarily focused on mental health, addiction, and activism, because those are three pillars of a lot of importance in my life. I've struggled with addiction for quite a few years, and I'm sober now, so that ties a lot into everything that I do. I'm originally from Canada. I've been here for 4 years.
So you grew up in Canada?
I did, yeah.
What was life like there?
Not great. I grew up in Toronto, which is quite a big city. Like, the population of New Zealand and the population of Toronto are the same, so it was like 5 million people crammed into one city, which is pretty crazy. It was okay. There were definitely some good parts of being in a city that big, but it also, I got into a lot of drugs and bad behaviors pretty early, so I was kind of a mess when I was there.
So now you're into mental health for advocacy.
Yes.
How's that journey been for you?
It's been, everything that I talk about is from my own lived experience. I come from a place of, this is where I was, this is what I went through, and now this is where I've been able to come out the other side of. So I think part of what I talk about with that in my music and in my social media is, I guess, healing and forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of others, and it's been good. Yeah.
What are some of the more challenging things that you've had to, in your healing journey, what are some of the most challenging things?
I think for me, the thing that's been hardest is forgiving myself. In the throes of, in the worst parts of my mental illness and my addiction and stuff, I did some things that, will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. And it's really easy to kind of paint yourself as a bad person because of that, and just let that, run the rest of your life. And I did let it run my life for quite a long time. So it kind of got to, I guess I had the realization that in order to get out of that and stop being that person that I didn't want to be, the first thing that I had to do was forgive myself for all of those things that I was really hating myself for, which is not easy. It's incredibly difficult, but it has become, I guess, the main pillar of what I advocate for in mental health recovery, is just the fact that, your mistakes, your past actions don't define who you are. You don't have to let them define who you are for yourself or for other people, and that everybody is innately, a good human being who is worthy of dignity and respect, and should be given that regardless of what they've done. And everyone deserves second, third, fourth, fifth chances to become the best person.
I agree with that, and it is so hard Because sometimes the thoughts we say to ourselves, we wouldn't even say it to another human being.
Yeah.
And when
Absolutely.
I recognize that about even in my journey myself, I'm like, man, I wouldn't say this to anyone else. So it's funny how we can extend so much empathy, even with a bad mental condition or state. We can extend empathy, but to ourselves we're so unforgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some steps that you've done personally to help yourself? Yeah.
I'm in a program called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. I actually just came from a session before this, and DBT focuses on four different components. The main one is mindfulness, and mindfulness like underpins everything. And then you have emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, and crisis survival are the three pillars of it. And one of the, so like there's a whole bunch of different skills, because it's all about like helping you become your own therapist, is what they say, and like retrain your brain to go down different pathways. One of the skills is called radical acceptance, and radical acceptance is something that's been incredibly helpful for me. Radical acceptance is basically, it basically is what it sounds like, it's just like, it's just radically accepting everything that you can't change and that you can change, and that's good and that's bad. And it's hard. It's really, really hard, but it's definitely been something that is incredibly helpful for me, especially when it comes to accepting things that I am not very proud of.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so you talk about going to therapy. In my experience, especially within Pacific people, there's kind of like a stain on going to therapy. It's a sign of weakness. For some people, they don't even want to be put into the system because it'll affect their livelihood. It'll maybe affect their job, because once you're in the system, you're kind of like, oh, this person can't work this, or he might be off for 2 weeks because he has a mental health condition. And I find it very brave of you to like speak openly about therapy, because that's a conversation that people usually keep behind doors. What's kind of like your take on that mindset towards therapy?
So I think what you're saying about fear about being put in the system is valid. I think that like, for example, I have 2 diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder, and both of those disorders hold quite a bit of stigma. Borderline personality disorder, I'd say, especially holds quite a bit of stigma, and it does make it hard. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say like, nothing bad is going to happen from having that diagnosis, because, like, for example, I'm trying to get a residency in this country, right? And I'm currently on a visa, and they see my mental health diagnoses and my medical records and stuff like that, and it makes it harder, because borderline personality disorder has stigma attached to it. Like, there are extra steps that I have to take in order to get the visa, because they make assumptions about who I am as a person based on that diagnosis. But I think it also opens up a lot of doors. It also makes your life a lot easier in the long run, because you can get the help that you need. But I would also say that the reason why I'm so open about it, and the reason that I would encourage other people to do the same thing, is because the only way that stigma is dismantled is if more and more people keep being open about it and keep saying, like, I have this diagnosis. Like, borderline is one example, but like another great example of that is antisocial personality disorder, or what we would call like psychopaths.
Right.
That's like probably the most stigmatized mental illness, but at the end of the day, like, people don't want to talk about it, people don't want to acknowledge it, but those are still people, they're still human beings that have a diagnosis and have a mental condition that is incredibly misunderstood and incredibly stigmatized and portrayed as like evil.
I agree. On social media, like, you just have to scroll through TikTok and they'll be
so
like,
easy.
this is what even narcissist, right?
Yeah, narcissistic
behavior. Could share some thoughts around that?
I think that Yeah, as I was saying, I think that the only way that we can move away from that stuff is if more and more and more people start coming forward and saying, I'm a narcissist, I'm a psychopath, I'm borderline, and this is what my life is actually like, so that we can get actual pictures of what these people really are and stop just painting people with the brush that Hollywood has given us, you know? So I think that, when tying it back into going to therapy and getting into the system and all of that stuff, I would say that from like a community-based perspective, on top of doing it for yourself, you're doing it for everybody else. You know, you're doing it for your community. You're doing it for children that are going to grow up, and whether they like it or not, they're going to end up with these conditions. And the most that we can do for them and the best that we can do for them is allow them to have a world that they come into where they're not going to be automatically judged and have their lives be made harder just because of a condition that they were born with or that ended up coming because of their upbringing that they have no control over.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's such a beautiful way to look at it. Like I'm now looking at it your way, for them to come forward and not try to make them look bad. Because I'm sure we're all guilty of it at some stage, where we try and make someone feel bad because they're not, you know, all there. So
it's very easy to throw those words around as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah. And it's common.
It's so common.
A lot of people do it.
I mean, I've done it as well, you know, like sometimes I have to catch myself from just being like, oh, that's narcissistic behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a buzzword now.
Absolutely.
The content creators hold on it, and it's even ADHD, like, yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Because like social media is making these very heavy and weighed topics into such short form.
Yeah.
And it's misleading almost, in a sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that one's tricky as well, because I think there's two sides of that. Like on one side, I see this language becoming a lot more accessible, and that can be a good thing, because like, you know, people can like, armchair diagnosis and self-diagnosis is so tricky, because like on one side you're not a professional and you can't say like you don't have the training to be able to say what diagnoses you have based on what you read online. But at the same time, I think that it's a good starting point. Like, it can't be the be all and end all, but I think that like if someone, you know, is on ADHD TikTok and they're like, I really relate to this stuff, and it helps them connect with things, especially like children and teenagers and stuff that are going through a lot of changes and are like really struggling to figure out what's going on with themselves. If it can help them, like bring them a little bit of peace and understanding of like what's going on in their mind, even if it's just temporary, you know, even if just for like 6 months they're like, I have ADHD, and then because they're going through puberty or whatever, things change, and they decide, actually, no, I don't have ADHD. I just thought I did for that point in time. I think that's okay. You know, I think, yeah. But then at the same time, it can be dangerous, because it can, like, I guess, delegitimize and invalidate a lot of the real experiences that people are going through. So I think you have to be careful with it. I think that, And
I guess, you know, even for people who may be raised in poverty, whose, you know, mental health is not a conversation that's usually had if your parents are working full time to provide for money, for food. It's your conversations is, how are you? How was work? And then that's it.
Yeah.
So it could be helpful for people that have those experiences. Sure. But like with everything that comes with awareness, there's always a risk that it runs.
Yeah.
And I feel like the risks can always be mitigated, but spreading a message and trying to get the importance of it across is very hard to do.
Yeah.
And people do campaigns all the times. Like we have like All Lives Matter, we have Black Lives Matter, and you know how All Lives Matter, it triggered people who were racist. Black Lives Matter triggered the same people as well. Oh no, wait, Black Lives Matter triggered people who were racist. All Lives Matter were the people who didn't get the point. There's the feminist hashtag, you know, all men are trash, the generalization of things. So there was a huge, even those hashtags made me more educated about those causes, about race, about you know, what was happening in Black America, feminism. That educated me because I was so triggered from the word, and I was like, hold up, I want to do some research into this. And then I started understanding the movement. I was like, they're standing for women, the rights of women.
Yeah.
So I guess in that sense, that's something to also consider with any movement. There will always be a risk that happens. And speaking of which, you know, of mental health as well, we're seeing on social media, you know, Palestine and Israel, and how these events, these current events, horrible events, are affecting the mental health of youth or everyone. Why do you think, what's your thoughts on that? Of having such strong things happening around being accessible on social media, even the videos being accessible. What are your thoughts on that?
It is, it's definitely some really graphic stuff. I think that when it comes to these systemic issues that are in Palestine or in the States or here, I think that there's only so much help that you can get from going to therapy if then every single day the system that you live in is broken and is damaging you and oppressing you. And I think ultimately therapy and medication and these things are helpful, but in the system that we are living in, they're kind of a band-aid over a missing limb, you know, trying to put a band-aid on a missing limb. And you can't just we can't just keep band-aiding it and then going about our lives as if things are normal. At the end of the day, if we really want, like, we're seeing like the highest rates of all of these mental illnesses that we've ever seen, you know, and I think that ultimately that's because we've reached a point where the system that we are in is not sustainable anymore, and it's destroying all of us. And if we really want the change that we need, what we need to do is not work on ourselves. I mean, we do need to work on ourselves. I'm not saying don't work on yourself, but on top of that, you need to work to break down this system that is destroying all of us. So I think, seeing the images coming out of Palestine is really, really hard. And I know a lot of people that don't want to look at them at all. And I understand that because it's hard to look at. It is. But I think that it's a reminder every single day of the fact that we need to stop this from happening. We need to change the system. We need to end U.S. imperialism and the things that it's doing all over the world. So it's going to hurt your mental health in the short term. It is. Like, you can't see a genocide and be an empathetic human and not have that hurt your mental health, you know? But I think you need to take those emotions. Every emotion that we have is here for a reason, you know? That's another thing they teach you in DBT, is that your emotions are here to tell you things. You need to listen to those emotions and act on them. And if you see these things and you feel sadness and anger and disgust, the disgust is telling you that there's something that you're seeing that shouldn't be happening. The anger is telling you that you need to act, and the sadness is telling you that you need to connect with other humans. So you just follow all of those emotions, do all of those things. Act, stop that from happening in any way that you can, and connect with other people, you know?
And I like the way you put it, because usually when it's like political banter, they're like, no, you have to focus on yourself, and then this other side is saying, no, the world has to change. But it's a measure of duality. You have to work on yourself and also hold systems or institutions accountable for what they're driving in societies to cause people to have such like mental health issues. And you're a pro-Palestinian advocate. I just want to ask you a question. why should people be concerned about what's happening in Palestine right now?
So I think that what is happening right now in Palestine is I mean, frankly, it's something that's been happening for the last 100 years. It's just right now we're looking at it. But I think that it's also a microcosm of colonialism that has happened the world over for the past 500 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. And I think that the only difference is that right now, as we were just talking about, it's being live streamed to our phones, and we're seeing that. We know as human beings that indigenous people should have the rights to their land, and that settlers shouldn't be coming in and wiping out entire populations and committing ethnic cleansing to create their own nation, to create their own ethno-states in those places. It has happened for a very, very long time, but right now we are lucky enough that we are living in a time where we can see that happening, and we have the opportunity to stop this one, you know? So I think that that is something that every single person should act on. If you're a human with empathy, then you should care about this.
I think that's a great way to look at it. You know, this is one of the benefits of tech. We're able to have access to what's going on around the world, and if we know we can contribute to it, we should. There's a lot of talk around performative activism, and I've seen it. I'm sure other people have seen it as well. Just people hopping on trends, and maybe this is like something that's stemmed out of, you know, technology and how aware we are of things worldwide. But one day it's like some people are they're saying they're advocates for this, and then advocate for something else, and it's just this trend of ongoing bandwagoning on things. And then sometimes people have judgments. They'll look like, but what are you actually doing about this? Do you actually care about it? Or are you just sharing it to be part of a trend, sharing to your group or influenced circle that you care about something? Do you believe in performative activism? What are your thoughts on it?
I think that performative activism as a term is divisive, and I think that it's dangerous to really do anything that encourages division within a movement. I think that, I think it's important to have as many people as you can, whether it's about Palestine, whether it's about environmentalism or whatever you are advocating for. I think that ultimately we can't know what is happening inside someone else's mind. We can never know what someone else's intentions are. And I think that it's a dangerous route to go down to start saying, like, my activism is better than your activism, or you are not contributing to this cause in the right way, you know? So I think that, and I would also even, I mean, this might just be me being a little bit of a conspiracist, but I would even argue that maybe that term was created to break up causes, you know?
Yeah.
To
believe that.
Cause
Yeah.
infighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just my thought. I think the only kind of activism that I take issue with is any kind of activism that causes division, you know? And I think, so like, for example, I think I would, in the pro-Palestinian cause, the only people that I would say, no, get out of here, are people that are using it as an excuse for anti-Semitism. So like every once in a while, I will get people that comment on my TikTok and they start off saying, yeah, I'm pro-Palestine, fuck Israel, and then they will end up going down into Hitler was right, you know? And
what the hell?
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. And they'll say like, yeah, these people have always been doing this. This is just what these people are like, and it's crazy. It's like, my partner is Jewish, and one of the biggest advocacy groups in New Zealand right now is day13n, who is a group of Jewish anti-Zionist Jews, and I think that it's incredibly ignorant to try to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and to try and co-opt a movement for your own hate. So I would say, yeah, that's the only time where I say it's okay to cause division within a movement, is if some of the people in the movement are actively using it to just co-opt it for their own hatred. Then we can say, no, fuck you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're okay. You're okay. You're all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we can say, no, get out of here. You're not part of us. But everybody else, I think you should just welcome people in and embrace everybody into the movement and not try and divide it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. So with your response, what then would be your advice to someone who wants to support a movement, but maybe they don't know everything about it yet? What would your advice be to someone who's keen to jump on it?
I think, educate yourself, do research, do as much research as you can, get involved, go to protests, get connected to the community, and get connected to people who are actually part of the community that you are trying to, help and advocate for. So, like, if you are trying to be pro-Palestinian and you're not Palestinian, go to a protest, speak to some Palestinian people, hear their firsthand stories, or whatever it is. Try to, and uplift their voices. I think it's really, really important as someone who is trying to advocate for a community that you're not part of, to make sure that you are not replacing the voices of the people that you are saying that you're advocating for. Try to uplift the voices of the people who are actually connected to the cause in a very real sense. Yeah.
And speaking of voices, this will probably segue us into a conversation about free speech versus hate speech. Whatever side of ideological beliefs or political sides you're on, there's an idea that whatever you say, whoever you are, will always cause offense to someone else. What are your thoughts on free speech?
I just in general, I think that free speech is incredibly important. I think that it is an underpinning of democracy and freedom. And I don't think that we should be infringing on people's right to free speech. I think that people misconstrue that to mean, when someone says, I have a right to free speech, I think that a lot of the time they are saying, I should have a freedom from consequences of my speech. And I think that it's important to remember that you have a right to free speech just as much as anybody else has a right to free speech, and they also have a right to react to what you're saying and hold you accountable for what you're saying and maybe cuss you out for what you're saying.
I'm a strong believer in that as well. Like, you can say whatever you want to say, as long as you're willing to face the consequences of what you say. And the reason why I believe that is because there's a power in your voice. And people need to acknowledge free speech is not just for you to say whatever the hell you want. What you say has consequences. And they won't be able to learn what they're saying is damaging without the consequence. So I'm a huge believer in that as well. And also true speech. I believe in true speech, but without free speech, you can't be true speech. So I don't believe in going out and saying whatever the hell you want. I believe that you say what's true to you, and sometimes what's true to someone could be actually heinous. It's crazy, but as long as it's true to them, then I believe they should speak it. But if they're just speaking lies, I'm just like, is it worthy? Is it worth the time? And there's a lot of censorship now across platforms. Like, for example, on TikTok, if you post something about Palestine, it's on their community guidelines that could be taken down. And I think
videos removed.
So I think these platforms with huge influence that can create major impact, they can cause a disservice on what do you call it? They're doing a disservice for movements that actually matter. And what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think it's tricky because it's because, as you were talking about the community guidelines, they are able to say this is hate speech and free speech doesn't include hate speech, and so therefore we can take it out. And, like, to an extent, I I agree with that, but I also think that it's dangerous when you have a company or an organization that can be paid for and bought deciding what is hate speech and what isn't hate speech and where the lines of free speech end based on what their benefactors are telling them, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it's really hard because I understand where they're coming from of not wanting to put content out that's going to damage people, but then, yeah, where is the line? Where do they get to decide what that is? Yeah, it's hard. And honestly, like, Meta is even worse than TikTok when it comes to that stuff. Like, Instagram and Facebook, I've been censored a lot harder than I have on TikTok. TikTok is bad too, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the devil is in the details. It's very hard because the power of what censorship is lies in either the company who it's brought out by. I feel like that should be decided by the collective and not just an institution or a singular company with a board or a group, an interest group. But like you, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult because beliefs are so, like, they contrast each other all the time. And I don't think there's one person who knows everything or a group of people who knows everything. But I believe that I believe in decentralization. So if there are more voices in different subgroups that are heard bringing forward their opinions, I feel like that's better because you're decentering a bad decision to be made. Whereas if it's all held in one place, one bad person in that position could easily cause massive destruction.
Right.
So I believe in decentralization, but also a good way for those groups to come about to make something happen so voices are heard more.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think it's really easy, especially with the way that the algorithms on social media work, where they give you the content that you want to see. I think it's really easy for people to get caught in like echo chambers where their beliefs and their opinions are just repeated back at them over and over again, and that's how you see people get like more and more and more radicalized, because I think that we don't have enough like diverse views and stuff coming in so that we can really like critically think about our beliefs and compare them to other ones and change them and
Absolutely. And I'll probably use Samoan culture to further like the reason as to why I believe in decentralization in Samoa. Every village has their own voice, and then they have matais, so they're like leaders, and they have families under them, and an agreement cannot be pushed forward unless everyone agrees. So discussions will go on for years. It goes to court. So for something to happen, there must be an agreement where everyone's voice is heard.
Wow.
And if that doesn't happen, it's not going forward. I guess the downside to that is that decisions that need to be made quickly are harder to make happen.
Right.
Even though you can look at it and be like, yes, that's the right thing to do. But also if someone was coming in with a bad intention or something to corrupt their village or their land, it is much harder to also. So it's that whole balancing thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers.
Yeah, it's
but
tough.
from using Samoan culture, I think that's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah, I like
and
that a
voices
lot.
are heard. And this is a common conversation that's always spread across Western politics. Representation. Where's representation? Samoa's the perfect place to give an example of what representation looks like, from a child who talks to their mom, to their father, and then takes that to the village chief. We don't get that in West. People don't care about politics in the West. Yeah. It's like, I know a lot of Pacific people who don't even care about voting because they don't feel represented in those spaces. And maybe because Samoa is a smaller nation, it's a lot, maybe the size of Samoa, if it expanded, it wouldn't work. I don't know if it'll work on a larger, there are 4 million people, if it would work, that system would work, but I think Samoa's a good example.
Yeah, I think that's like, and I mean, honestly, like, this is me getting into some radical stuff as well, but I think that I don't think that human beings are supposed to exist in such massive globalized societies, I think that things would run a lot smoother if everything was smaller communities that were able to represent everyone and communicate openly all together and come to consensus in order to make decisions. I think that after we overthrow this whole American imperialist oligarchy and rebuild from scratch, that I think that would be a very effective way to build the world is around smaller communities, like how we used to be before the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole thing around decolonization. And decolonization is such a bad word to like right-wing people. They're like, oh, you're going to disrupt the system. But their vision of it is chaos. Whereas I like what you said when you said we're not supposed to be all under one big power thing. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Like before we were existing peacefully in little tribes and coexisting along with each other. And they've rewritten our histories. You know, they've said, oh, we were savages eating each other, blah, blah, blah. And maybe some of those are true, but that's not telling of the full of how the Samoan history is. How we had village politics and we knew how to deal with it, but they totally disregard all of that to get that source of power. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah. I think anything that tries to encourage people to move away from this centralized government that we are living under is automatically like demonized. Like it's the same as like anarchy, you know, like people say the word anarchy and you immediately think like rioting, like the purge kind of stuff, you know, but that's not what it is at all. Like for most of human history, we were living under anarchy, just as there was no centralized government that was passing laws that everybody had to follow. It was all like smaller community-based things, and that is how we are supposed to live as a species, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're always scaring us with the risk of, you know, burning houses and everything tearing.
I was saying recently, I think part of why, like, I was just like looking on like Netflix and stuff, and I was like, there's so much like dystopian fiction coming out right now, you know, like so much like post-apocalyptic stuff, and I think that it's propaganda, because I think that they want us to believe that without a police force and a centralized government to enforce laws, we're going to automatically just turn into gangs and start killing each other and cannibalizing each other and stuff. And I think that that's like so unrealistic. I think that the innate goodness of humanity is so much stronger, and they're scared that we're going to realize that and realize that we don't need this centralized gang to police our every move. And so they fill us with propaganda to make us believe that if the government and modern society were to fall, it would become Mad Max. You know? That's
so true. Like, I was watching this other Netflix film, I think like 3 months ago. It was about like the CIA doing an EMP throughout America, some part of America, and then everyone got their guns out. You know, the rednecks came out with their guns and everything. And it's like, this is so weird. Yeah. And it when people watch those films, they don't know that they're automatically assuming that narrative of what would happen. You're right. It probably is propaganda.
I think so. I think it's just encouraging division, and it's just like tiny little things that like make you want to automatically assume that the people around you are bad. You know, tiny little things like that. Like, yeah, it's not going to be just like overtly in your face saying follow the government or else. It's just like reminding you can't trust other people. You can't trust other people. Without people telling you what to do, people are going to automatically do bad things. Yeah. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that is human nature.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because in business, there's a concept called fear and abundance on how to get sales. If you're constantly operating in a place of fear in your business structure and systems, you will not meet or achieve your goals that you're setting out. Whereas if you're thinking in a place of abundance, because in fear, you're operating like that person is going to take my opportunity. Yeah. I'm going to put all my energy into bringing them down so they don't. In abundance, you actualize that there are actually so many opportunities, and you're not fearing someone else's thing. Right. And they always encourage people to live or to construct their businesses in a place of abundance.
Right.
Yeah, so it's very similar in
Yeah.
that term.
Yeah. I guess it would be if you're encouraging if the people on top are always encouraging each other to, or themselves to, focus on a place of abundance to grow their businesses, and you don't want your workers
Yeah.
to do that, you're going to encourage them to live in a place of fear.
Exactly. Yeah. So what an interesting world we live in. Oh, that's crazy. But thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Yeah. No, thank
I
you.
usually wrap up the interview by giving the opportunity to our guests to either share with us a hot take or word of encouragement. So I'll give you a choice. What would you like to share, a hot take or words of encouragement?
I mean, I guess going back to what I was talking about before, hot take and words of encouragement at the same time, that I'll say is psychopaths and narcissists are not bad people. Yeah.
Damn.
People,
Yeah.
it's a hard pill to swallow, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Now, I applaud you for your empathy, because it's so hard. And people who have empathy, I feel like broken people have the best empathy. Like, you have to be broken to understand and empathize with someone. And often when I cross paths with people who haven't really been through many life challenges, they're quite unempathetic or judgmental. So I love it when I come across people like yourself who've been through shit, and then they can, in the same breath, say psychopaths and narcissists. In that same breath. So I love your work. I love your character. I love what you do. And just this conversation, I've learned so much from you. And continue the good work. And thank you for teaching me some things today. And I hope we could do another episode down the line.
Yeah, I would love that. Steven said too, if you want to get on an episode.
Yeah,
I'd love
that'll be
to
cool.
speak. Yeah.
A debate between you guys.
Yeah,
That'll be
yeah, yeah.
awesome. But thank you so much, Daylen, for coming onto the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.